Hi there. Welcome to this mini-series on what works for women at work. I'm Evelyn Axelrod, and I'll be your guide on this exciting adventure. By day, I'm the VP of the Career Foundation, an innovative nonprofit organization driving inclusive employment across Canada. Personally, I'm interested in exploring a little more about what works for women like us so we can scale learnings and accelerate gender parity. I'm all about solutions, so join me on this year-long journey and get ready to hear inspiring stories, practical lessons, and powerful mindset shifts that will create leadership transformation. Let's get started.
Okay.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to What Works for Women at Work. This is our second video in the interview series that we're just getting started. My name is Evelyn Axelrod, and I am so excited to be joined by Sharmini, my dear friend Sharmini Fernando, who has been in the nonprofit sector, champion in nonprofit leadership for a long, long time. And it's my honor to sit down with you and talk a little bit more about that leadership journey, Sharmini. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thank you for inviting me, Eve, and happy to have our conversation.
And happy International Women's Day.
Happy
And,
International Women's Day to you too.
and may it always be celebrated every day.
Every day is International Women's Day. We make 52% of the population of this planet. So
that's right.
We run the world.
We run the world. I love it. So Shamini, before we get into it, your leadership journey, the ecosystem in which you have been working with is so vast. You've gone through health, environment, education, poverty. You've done it all in nonprofit. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
It's a long journey. It feels like a very long and actually humbling journey. I've been very blessed, I have to say, to participate in making the world and in remaking the world. I've always been a community development worker. I see myself in community development pretty much at every stage of my life, every job that I've had the privilege of being a part of, every organization that I've had the privilege of working in. And so in a kind of trying to synthesize all of that is a little tough. I thought about it. I thought, what are the things that have really illuminated my life? And it has to be the desire to be a part of social justice. From the time I was very young, in my early 20s, even prior to that, I'm an immigrant settler in Canada. I came here as a child, and I came from a country that had a lot of poverty, and I saw that. And many of us who come from in worlds that are called the third world, or the global south, see that in our communities. And so that also had a big impact on my life. Always questioning, do I, like the basic question for me has always been, I'm able to eat because someone else is not able to eat, right? And so that was something that became very obvious to me as a 7-year-old, because I would always be with, like, we're in a community I grew up in Colombo, which is a big city in Sri Lanka, and it was always there. Poverty was always there. Coming to Canada, my experience of racism also was a very important intellectually growing experience. And I'm queer. So then as I became older and I came into my sexual orientation, that also helped me to understand my place, how it was structural, how it limited my options, but it also expanded my horizons. So all of these things that made me sociologically can be seen as limits, but for me, they were actual illuminating, like huge, like possibilities. So the margin to me has always been the horizon. It has never been the limit. And so it's just, I think that's just me. So when I think of the margin, I never think of not being in the center. I think of being in the vanguard. I think of being in the space of the possibility, of the imagination, of creativity, of movement to uncharted territory. And it's a voyage, really, and for me, it has been absolutely a blessing and um, totally awesome. I would not change an iota of my journey through being racialized. I didn't know I was brown until I got here. And so, yeah, so I mean, from a career perspective, I guess I was always into figuring that out, in everything that I did. I wanted to be a part of making things better for myself. Um, so when I went back to Sri Lanka and did international development work in the midst of an active war zone, that also was, it also destroyed me in a particular way, but it was the crack that really let a lot of light in as well. Right. And so when I came back to Canada after that very, very difficult, shattering experience, it also created all these awesome opportunities as well, because, that opened up my these third, fourth, fifth eyes in my head about seeing things differently. So, um, then I ended up working for a national charity as their first diversity consultant. Um, I moved into working from there straight into working at Regent Park and headed up the Pathways to Education program at Regent Park, which served, hundreds of kids in the city and changed their lives, which was a tremendously um, humbling experience. It was an awesome program. I feel like I was at the sort of the height of it at a particular point in time before, the changes happen, as changes always do. And then I moved to become a consultant for a number of years, and that's where I met you. And I was given the opportunity and the experience of supporting organizations that were going through a kind of disequilibrium. Organizations, like people, have life cycles, and many organizations go through their cyclical evolution. And sometimes it's a growing environment, sometimes it's a shrinking environment, and when the shrinking happens, the change management that's required is actually emotional as much as it's structural. And so I would go in and support these organizations that were going through these changes. Became an interim executive director, and I had lots of amazing opportunities to support organizations. And then, of course, COVID hit, and COVID was a defining moment in Canada, in the world, globally. At that time, ran a very, very important drop-in, and most drop-ins in the city were supporting the most vulnerable, people who'd lost their jobs, people who were in the retail sector, in the hospitality businesses. Like, all of these shuttered, and people needed food, people needed places to come to get support, people needed to get masks. We knew nothing in March of 2020. We didn't get vaccines until 2021, a whole year later. And so, I ran a very important program in the northwest quadrant of the city of Toronto. We had one of the first micro vaccine clinics that supported the community. I ran the vaccine engagement program for that sector of the city where hundreds of thousands of people were given vaccine education and vaccines. Coordinated that $1.5 million vaccine operation that happened that the city was a part of. And I ran that within the confines of a very small organization. And it just sort of illuminated to me the power that leadership, not just personal, but sector-wide leadership could play, that every person ended up feeling like they could make a difference. The volunteerism that occurred during that time was mind-blowing. If I could have captured that moment and put it in a bottle, I could become a bazillionaire, because it's just was unbelievable. Everybody through their fear, worked together to turn some things around, to turn the fear around. And that was mind-bogglingly awesome. And I was right there in the front lines of it. Changed my life to see the possibilities of people coming together to volunteer, to help each other out. Unfortunately, a lot of that changed, as things opened up and other currents kind of came in the way, and we lost some of that momentum. But I was very happy to be a part of it when it was happening. And then, of course, the position at the Neighbourhood group came up as a chief operating officer, and I applied for it. And here I am now as the chief operating officer of a tremendous organization that is that's I would suggest one of the leaders in supporting social justice and working for people who are in deep poverty with issues of homelessness or the opioid crisis, or just life, with home care and childcare. We support over 40,000 people in the city in any given year. So it's a tremendous, humbling experience to do this.
And it has been a tremendous journey you've described, but something that keeps coming through is the courage that it took, and that pivotal moment where things sort of crack open. And it could crack open and someone does something else with it, then let the light come in. And you chose to let the light come in.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I saw you. We talked through the pandemic, and you were in really precarious places, and it took courage, but it inspired courage. And you just talked about people coming together and working through the fear that was so rampant, and it changed the psyche of the globe. But people stood up and used their courage, and you inspired that courage in the work that you did. So there's a theme already emerging in terms of what works for women at work. It is, you have to take a stand.
Absolutely. I think courage is really important in the world, and we see this now globally, the courage that women have to look after the world that they're living in. And we see that is sort of an ingredient for my life. And I can only speak, I'm only going to speak about my life, so I'm not going to make any major generalizations. But courage has been the thing that has driven my life. And it comes with loss. It's not all fun and games. It's not all positive, because with courage comes knowing that you're going to lose things. And then a person, in my case, me, will have to make a decision about what does courage mean to my soul, who I am as a human being to live in the world. What does that mean? Um, and and it's something that, when I came out, um, and talked about my sexual orientation, that was courageous because I was just a kid, you know, 19. My mom said, "What the hell do you know? How can you be a lesbian? You haven't even had a life." And it's like, that is my, it was interesting to have this conversation with my mother, who knew lesbians in her life, but it was sort of like they were older. They were not young kids. They were not, in her mind, a young person. And so that courage for me to speak to the most powerful person in my life, who was my mother. And I figured if I could speak truth to that power, everything else is, everybody else is not very important. Like that, like, to be the most powerful person in my life was my mother. And if I could speak truth to her, if I could engage with her, if I could wrestle with her, fight with her, I could probably do pretty much anything. And that was in my mind. Wasn't even fully conscious of it, but now that I think back of it, she was scary. She was my mother. And so I think that's the kind of thing that is about, like, what are your fears, and what are the things that cause you fear, and can you wrestle with those fears? What can you do to wrestle with those fears? What do you need to wrestle with those fears so that you can come to the light that is inside you?
And what you talked about there with your coming out to your mom,
Mhm.
there's as you describe it, you're talking about, if I can speak true to this power that's so
Yeah,
powerful in my life, I'll be okay. But you
yeah.
were thinking, it seems that you were thinking through the situation,
Mhm,
not thinking of the situation, because
mhm,
you had to survive it.
mhm,
There had to be a way through it.
mhm.
Um, so have there been other moments in your career that you found yourself dealing with those kinds of things? Like, do you think that that was a pivotal mind shift for you? And have you observed other things like that in your own leadership journey or in others?
Sure. I mean, there's been many, like, I think one of the, if I were to be critical of my journey, is that there have been many career limiting moves that I've made in my life. Um, I overspoke, I've been too honest, uh, I've not been strategic, I've not had a plan, I've not been careerist, I've not been ambitious enough. I mean, there's been many, many points, in my journey where I've limited my career options. And much of it had to do with this sort of uh, tension between my values
Mm,
and what the systems that I've had to work with. So these are all systems. Like, the family is a system, and the family's replicated in many, many, many structures. Our entire institutional structure, the hierarchies, how we interact with each other, how we play our roles, who are the quote unquote members of those hierarchies. It is a replication of the family. And if in my case, I spoke truth to that structure of my family to become whole as a human being, I would have to speak truth to those other structures as well. And those are career limiting truths, right? And so this is what I think about. Like, if you are going to be a leader, leadership is not structural, leadership is internal. You are your you have to be the master of your own life. If you can become that, it doesn't matter what's in the matrix. Like, who cares? You will be driven by what gives you a sense of purpose. And that is leadership to me.
Let's dissect those two a little bit. Your journey is a really clear example of where you have led yourself to live your best life in alignment with your values. And that intersects for me, certainly in my career as well.
Mm-hmm.
Your career, it is a blessing and a gift
Mm-hmm.
when your career can
Mm-hmm.
reflect your values.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're all in search of that. But there are times when you come into work and you, to the best of your knowledge, you are doing work that is aligned with your values. And as you grow
Mm-hmm.
in that field, there are structural obstacles in the way. There
Mm-hmm.
are personalities that are different from you and they have different values.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, and what advice would you give women in terms of navigating those kinds of spaces while holding true to yourself?
It's hard, first of all. Okay. Um, I would I would recommend finding someone you can talk to, either either a mentor who is another woman, a therapist, a counselor, somebody who you could take these emotions that are being elicited by the structural pressures that are being put upon you, to unpack that so that you don't become uh, your emotions don't rule you.
Mhm.
Right? You have to find the gap between your emotions and your thoughts. Emotions are a place where you're reacting. Thoughts are a place where you're responding. Right? And when you respond, you have taken the time to percolate all of the emotions that you're having. Get it to your mind. It's time, right? Get it to your mind so that you could strategize and respond. You could navigate the difficult places that you're in.
Wow, that's, yeah, that is difficult work when you're in a moment as a leader as well and needing to respond and people are looking to you to respond in that moment because as leaders oftentimes people think you have all the answers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And some of that responsibility is on us to
Mm-hmm.
let folks know that we don't have the answers, that we are
Mm-hmm.
here to
Mm-hmm.
help facilitate success as a group and come up with the best thing together, right? And
Mm-hmm.
when we sort of get away from the traditional way or thoughts around leadership, we could, serve together as leaders and build other leaders with us. But that requires humbleness.
Mm-hmm.
That requires
Mm-hmm.
um, circling yourself with people that you can be vulnerable with, that can be vulnerable with you,
Mm-hmm.
a trusting circle.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've gotten that with you and
Mm-hmm.
other women that I've had to lean on during
Mm-hmm.
difficult times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that I learned in my journey was how critical that is to be in
Mm-hmm.
the company of other women
Mm-hmm.
who are just nourishing to your soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we talk about family and other things when we get together, but there's this found family, this found circle that
Mm-hmm.
really can support your growth because you're supporting each other. But
Mm-hmm.
having that circle of
Mm-hmm.
women or allies and
Mm-hmm.
allies
Mm-hmm.
can really help you to center yourself in that confidence that you don't need to have all the answers right away. You can say, I don't know right now. Let
Yep,
me get back to you.
yep.
Giving yourself the time to distance that emotions from that most, appropriate response.
Mhm, mhm. I think I think you're 100% right, and I also think that leaders sometimes become um, the uh, the kind of uh, they occupy the space where other people can kind of direct their frustrations at,
Hmm.
right? And that becomes and therefore it becomes even more important to hold, like not to take that as personal, and that was a huge learning for me, um, because everything was kind of the personal is the political for
Yeah,
me,
yeah,
and to learn that no, this they need to feel like maybe the people who are your direct reports or the people you work with need to express the frustrations, because this is a system that you're working in, and especially in the human services, there's a lot of frustrations. It's normal. And how do you take that uh and still have that gap,
mm,
and listen? Where's the How do we listen in a kind of a manner that is truly empowering to the others, like acknowledging, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to take that with me. I don't have an answer right now, but how do you become uh, empathetic, almost an empathetic listener as a leader, instead of having to always feel like you have to respond?
yeah, and
Yeah,
solve the problem right
and
away.
solve the problems right away. Yeah,
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 we love to do that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
personalities like mine, we just
yeah.
jump into the problem. But doing it well requires you to take the time to understand what the problem is
Yes,
that you're
100%.
trying to solve.
Exactly.
And
I
then,
wonder if it's a women's thing. Sorry, I wonder if it's a women's thing that we're always called to solve problems. And in the family,
mm,
for example, we're like
mm-hmm,
the problem solvers,
mm-hmm,
we're the kind of fixers in a particular way, right? And like if something goes wrong, go talk to mom. I don't know. Like I wonder if there's that in the human services and the nonprofits, which is dominated by
yes,
women.
yes.
Um, is that kind of, is that in the, in the air? I don't
Oh,
know.
it's certainly part of our sector, the care sector, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we care, we're coming in to solve the food crisis and the
Mm-hmm.
education crisis, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's probably a large majority of the people you saw stood up as leaders
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
were, and not to go back too far, but the health workers who were
Mm-hmm.
impacted, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so there's certainly something to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to come back to what you talked about about that gap between emotion and thought,
Mm-hmm.
that gap between yourself and the person that you're empathetically listening to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that requires you to see that person and what they're sharing as a symptom of the structure,
True. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's their insecurities, it's their frustration, is but what is happening in the system that you can course correct to make people feel safer at work,
Mm-hmm.
more comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in that gap, and have you observed that in your own workplace, and how that supports better employee engagement even?
I think, yeah, I have. I've actually have experienced it at the neighborhood group
Mm,
community services, and how leadership listens. And I think this is something that is I mean, it's not that people aren't frustrated, people are human, they're frustrated, but there is a quality of listening without harm. It's a new way of listening. It's a new way of listening without feeling threatened by what you're hearing.
mhm.
And I think that's the other thing about you bring yourself, you do bring all of yourself, everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, to your work. To think that you leave that at home and you come to work, you're a different person, that's a naive way of thinking. Um, and if you can practice a place of kindness, like if you come from a place of kindness, that you don't necessarily have to be the one to find the solution, that this could be a collective problem solving, you did, process. If somebody's bringing something up, you know, you have the opportunity to say, this is a real problem. I'm sorry you're feeling this way. How can we together create an environment where we can find a solution together? How can we do that? You could be the person to have that conversation with your team. Um, you build your team, you figure things out, because the huge problem in many environments is it's a culture problem. And a culture is the way we do things around here. That's culture, basically. The methodologies. And if the way you do things around here is top driven, and everybody's then looking for the leader to do something, and then you can bash the leader because the leader did it, then you're doing a lot of things that is moving further and further away from courage and autonomy. You're responsible. You are an agent. You're as responsible for identifying as solving whatever challenge that comes your way. If you're going to identify a challenge, you have the capacity to identify some sort of way forward out of the challenge. You have that capacity, you have that agency. And if that is the leadership model of the ecosystem that you're working in, it could become a space of fulfillment.
So if we had to package something for aspiring leaders to say, this is the way you take care of yourself so you can take care of others on your journey, what would be the one thing that you would want them to know?
Spend time finding your values. It's well worth the time. If you could do that for yourself, it will have exponential impact on everything that you do. That's the first thing. Mind the gap between your thoughts and your emotions. You cannot have your emotions rule you, because emotions are that. They're your emotions. They come and they go. Thoughts are what you do with those emotions, and they're intentional and deliberate. And taking that time is going to give you strategy, it's going to give you intelligence, and it's going to show you a path forward out of your circumstance, positive or negative.
It's tough because leadership is complex,
Mhm.
and we're working with people, and we're
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And we want to take your advice and be with our people, have visibility with our people, be in the trenches with them,
Mhm.
while also having the wherewithal to step back and say, and remember that leadership is a responsibility. You're the
Mhm.
stewards of this
Yes.
organization, of these
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
and your decisions have long-lasting effects. Therefore, it cannot be driven by your emotion in the moment, because it may not be the best thing to do. You need to step back, it sounds like, from your advice, and
Mhm.
get that clarity
Mhm.
about what is best, considering all of the conditions that you must to
Mhm.
make that decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those, I would say, the three balls that you're constantly kind of juggling. It's Yeah, it's a lifelong journey. People shouldn't feel like, oh, they have to get it all right. You know, you might be 90 years old and you're still doing it, you know.
Yeah, that's right. We're living, growing human beings, and we do the
Absolutely.
best with what we've got. And when we know better, we do better, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And always be open to feedback, even if the feedback is not cool, even if it makes you feel, well, that doesn't make me feel good. I don't want that feedback. No, sometimes that kind of feedback
Mhm.
is information. Think of feedback as information. Even if the feedback, like I said, is makes you feel really crappy, it's still information.
And that kind of information, yes, it can hurt sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but you do what you will with it. You could either be
Mm-hmm.
the victim of
Mm-hmm.
it, or
Mm-hmm.
you could say, how can this serve me to take
Mm-hmm.
me to the next level? How can
Mm-hmm.
that crack,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
break me, but let the light in
100%.
so
That's
I
right.
can, yes, as I can
Mm-hmm.
illuminate my path forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Yeah,
We've come
it's a
full
journey.
circle.
It's a
Yeah.
journey. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. Seriously, it is. There is no, there really is no destination. It's all in the movement. It's all in the journey. And if you think there's a destination, you're going to be disappointed.
Mm.
You're going to be disappointed. If you think, oh, you become the COO, or oh, you become the CEO, and oh, you become the ruler of the world, you'll be disappointed because you are you. The journey is you. It's
And the
always
journey,
you.
is internal. And
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful growth path if we let it, but it
Mm-hmm.
requires us being patient with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
patient with others. Sharmini, thank you so much.
You're
Your
very
journey
welcome.
has been just so colorful.
Yeah.
So colorful, but so inspiring.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for sharing it
You're very
with me
welcome.
today and chatting. And really, as women listening on our conversation, there's so many nuggets that you shared that I hope women listen, hear, and find ways to integrate those into their journey, but also take care of themselves as they're building their leadership pathway. So thank you, Sharmini, very much for
Thank you for
joining
having
me.
me.
And thanks everyone for listening and join the conversation. I'm sure Sharmini would be happy to have anyone reach out to her.
Yeah,
Sharmini,
I'm on
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, great. So we're gonna put Sharmini's LinkedIn link on the bottom of this video, and you can feel free to reach out to her. And of course, feel free to reach out to me and join the conversation.
Thanks for checking out our discussion today. Keep prioritizing and investing in yourself. Check out the resources below and join the conversation.